last session of the day is our industry leaders panel. We have with us Ryan Smith, who presented yesterday, Director of ITAC, University of Utah, USA. We have James Cameron, who's the Executive Director, Australian Construction Industry Forum. We have Nicole Sullivan, Technical Solutions Manager, Green Building Council of Australia, and Ken McBryde, Architect Principal of Hassell. Thank you all for joining us. Just going to start off with a question to each of our panel members, and the first question is going to be to Ryan. Ryan and I were both at the Modular and Offsite Construction Summit in Edmonton, Alberta, about a week ago, and I wanted to propose a question to Ryan. Ryan is an architect, and it was interesting that I noted at the mock summit in Edmonton that there were no architectural firms as part of that. There was about 200 people there for the conference, and there was very, very little input or collaboration with architects and architecture. So as an architect, I wanted to ask Ryan, what was your perception of the off-site construction industry in Australia before you came, and now that you've been here for a couple of days and you've seen what you've seen, what do you think now?
Yeah, is this thing working? Can everyone hear me? Okay, all right. It's a good question. By the way, Damien didn't preface these questions with any one of us, so this is off the cuff. Thank you.
That's how I like it.
What do I think? So, yeah, I would say in North America there is a dearth of involvement from the design professions in this particular subject. Starting to gain interest, but I'll give an example. I submitted for our National Architects Convention, the American Institute of Architects, and also for the Canadian Architects Convention, submission of a workshop, morning workshop, where architects could bring in their plans and we could talk about if you were to utilize different prefabricated technologies, what kind of trade-offs would that include and how might they think about that differently. And the responses to those proposals we sent in is, if you want a box, go design a shoebox, but this is architecture. So this is the sentiment we're feeling is probably even stronger in North America than it is in a lot of places. We have a big barrier to overcome. My feeling here, being here at this conference and listening to the discussions and seeing diversity of disciplines represented in the audience and in the presentations, is that I think it's a much healthier conversation here, and I also think that that has opportunities for accelerating the acceptance of this in the traditional construction sector much more rapidly. So we are in North America trying to convince right now, as opposed to together trying to find solutions, and I think that's a very positive thing that I see here that I applaud you for.
Great, thank you. James, I was going to ask you about what sort of discussions are you having at ACIF around prefab, or are you having these discussions?
Well, in ACIF's policy suite, we support prefabrication, and there's quite a lot of commentary in our policy on sustainability about prefabrication. And but in terms of discussions I'm having, I mean, I've had some discussions with Warren in regards to coming to this conference, but I have to say that it's not huge on our radar, and I think conferences like this do a great deal to raise the profile of prefabrication in the industry. I note that PrefabAUS has a target of 10% prefabrication in the industry by 2020. And I think that's a great goal to have, and I think the setting of goals is key. I mean, I note that Sweden has 74% of its construction industry is prefabricated, so Australia has a long way to go, and I think it's something that ACIF needs to focus on, or the Australian Construction Industry Forum needs to focus on much more in the future, is prefabrication, and I very much welcome PrefabAUS to attend our meetings in the future.
Right. So before we came up with this, you mentioned that you only sort of learned of our existence about 3 months ago. So how were you alerted to us, and what was that discussion? How did that come about?
Well, it was my marketing manager. She sent me an email and said you might want to get in touch with PrefabAUS, and I did so. I gave Warren a call, and have been multiple discussions since then. And I think Warren's a great guy. I look forward to a lot more discussions in the future. Met you today, and hope to build relations with you in the future too. So it's all part of the process for me in the Australian Construction Industry Forum of bringing together key stakeholders to having those discussions. And I think ASIF members and some of the big players like Engineers Australia, Australian Institute of Architects, Housing Industry Association and Property Council would all be good to have them educated on the benefits of prefabrication and to have that much more in there.
So you think with the ACIF there's a much better opportunity for PrefabAUS to educate the broader industry about the opportunities and the benefits, etc., through that forum?
Absolutely, yeah. I would think that at the moment that the prefabrication industry is not really so much in the public imagination, unfortunately. And while there is government support, going back to the Vision 2020 paper back in 2006, which supported prefabrication, you have the ARC centres in Sydney and Melbourne now. Perhaps it could be better recognised in the National Construction Code than what it is at the moment. You have strong uptake with the industry in terms of Lend-Lease has created a prefabrication factory, Hutchison Builders the same. I know that Lend-Lease hope to manufacture $1 billion worth of materials for their prefab factory. But it seems to me that prefabrication is not really there in the public imagination at the moment, and I think that needs to change. I mean, I don't know. I've heard a lot of amazing presentations today. It's really impressed me, but I feel that I wonder where is the Tesla in the prefab industry, which really captures the imagination, that makes it a little bit sort of glamorous and sexy, and people think, oh gee, I'd like to have a piece of that. So I think PrefabAUS has its work cut out to raise the profile within the industry. Okay,
thank you for that input. Nicole, one thing I wanted to ask you about was the Green Star.
Yep.
So with prefabricated buildings, inherent in those, in the way that we build them, the way they construct them, they are much better performing buildings with less waste, more sustainable, etc. But a lot of that is not actually picked up in the Green Star rating tool. What opportunity is there for us to work with you guys to develop a tool or an element of that which really reflects the benefits of inherent benefits of prefabrication?
Yeah, so there are some elements of Green Star that can work well, but I think when you look at the way prefabrication works, Green Star has a construction and demolition waste credit, and certainly prefabrication is great at reducing waste, and it's good there. But I think one of the real elements that prefabrication delivers that Green Star can recognise better is that it's about doing more with less, and I heard that earlier today. It's all very well, construction and demolition waste credit recognises when you generate waste, what you do with it, where it goes, divert it from landfill, recycle it. But an even better solution is don't use the resources to make the stuff in the first place. I think that's really where prefabrication has a great niche. And right now at the GBCA, we're starting to talk about the next big release of Green Star in probably a couple of years' time from now. And we're really starting this blue sky thinking as to where does it need to go. And I'd love the prefab industry to be part of that discussion, because we need to move from doing less bad to doing more good. And I think the more that we can push to just use less resources in the first place, that's exactly the niche we want to be heading for.
That's great to hear. That sounds like an excellent opportunity, something we'll definitely be participating in the future.
Please do.
Okay. Ken, I don't really have a question for you. It's been a year. You were at our conference last year, so I thought it might just be a good opportunity for you to tell us what you've been doing, what you've been up to, and any interesting projects that you've been involved with.
I'd like to reflect on what some of the other speakers have just mentioned.
Sure.
I think as an architect I was trained in environmental or passive environmental design, which Crough was the precursor to what we call sustainability now. And back when I was trained at Queensland Uni, we had to surreptitiously try and sneak sustainability into our projects. Councils wouldn't let us collect rainwater, for example. Clients didn't understand solar angles or passive shading. So it was something we had to do by stealth, and it was a whole process of education. I'm really pleased to report now that sustainability is something we get asked to do by its very nature. It's part of our brief from the beginning. I think the prefab thing is running a parallel course to that, but just a few years behind, because 4 or 5 years ago I was trying to put 4 stories on top of an inner-city 1960s building, and a tier 2 builder and the client just shook their head and had no interest in a prefab timber CLT solution. It was a slam dunk for that project. It would have been perfect. Just yesterday I was in a meeting with the same builders, and they love the idea that we're proposing timber on top of an inner city building now. And I saw a cost plan for the first time in my life with CLT, recycled timber. It was all there, and I just thought, wow, how things have changed. These guys, these hardcore builders, the cost planners were all nodding every time the word timber was used. So it's changing fast. Prefab is changing fast, and soon I think we architects will be expected to use it, or expected to start with it at the beginning of the project. I also think the really exciting thing happening in the industry is the bright young minds at universities, and there's a few of them here, are absolutely attracted to it because of its inherent sustainability. And I think a lot of architects who talk to me about the projects I work on, they say, Ken, we want to work with you on some of your projects because they're projects with heart. And what I realise when I talk to these bright young architects is that in essence our industry is extremely elitist, and we supply a very small proportion of shelter needs through normal construction. But good design and prefabrication gives us the opportunity to absolutely spread out considered work way into remote areas to people who would never otherwise benefit from good design. So I'm enormously excited about where we're sitting now, and feel like the industry is absolutely at a tipping point. And the Tesla that we're looking for, if you Google around, you'll find that some of the biggest named architects in the world are designing very sexy prefab houses that are to be collector's items for those elitists who want some prefab beach house somewhere. So sooner or later it will have captured the imagination of a lot of people, I think.
Good, okay. I thought maybe now we just might throw it open to the audience. If anybody has a question that they'd like to ask any member of the panel, I'll hand it over. Yes, Pam.
I've got a question.
Wait for the mic.
Thanks. I've got a question for Nicole. Nicole, my name's Pamela Bell. I'm from New Zealand, Prefab NZ. In New Zealand, we've had a conversation about how do we start getting Green Star ratings applied in factory. Have you guys started to have that conversation, or where is that at here?
Not directly. The way that it works is that we have a design and as-built tool, and you can get a design rating based on the design of the project, but your final rating is actually the as-built rating. In years gone by, you used to be able to get a design rating and then kind of build what you liked, so that's been changed now. You actually have to rate what's really been built. But the benefit of the design review rating, if you choose to do it, you don't have to, is that you can kind of get that stamp of approval of, yes, what you're planning on is really going to get you to those Green Star points that you're looking for once you get to as-built stage. So I think that's where the link would be at this stage.
I'd like to pick up, thanks for those great insights that you all provided. I think it's really interesting to get a range of views of what's happening across different parts of the industry. Some of the issues that have been raised though, and I think in a way, Ken's point about the bright young minds that are coming forward, the architects in training, really compare in a way with some of the comments this morning that really there are some gaps between what industry is doing, what universities are doing, what we're providing in training. And so I guess to each panel member, I guess, how can the issues of off-site construction, the benefits of this, both in terms of time and cost, the use of materials, the reduced waste, how can those ideas be brought in much earlier to educational institutions across the board, but particularly, I guess, in tertiary education?
I want to start with you, Ryan.
I hesitate to suggest that, for instance, in a traditional architectural education, because that's where I teach, I think there's others in the room that have gone through that experience and teach as well and research. I would hesitate to say we're going to focus now on prefabrication as a course, for instance, or as a specific subject. Rather, how can we use that as a vehicle or a method to look at the pressing needs of society? For instance, aging is a real issue across the globe, especially in developed countries, and Australia is one of those. We know that in 50 years, our population of 65 and older will be potentially larger than under 65. That's an incredible statistic. People are having fewer and fewer children. We have health and healthcare is increased. So what are we going to do to solve that problem? That's a major issue. And immediately my mind goes to what are the quick and novel and even adaptable solutions to that particular issue. We're working with a company right now that was an outgrowth of that question, and we're looking at home healthcare, which is also growing as a solution. So if anyone's not aware that eventually in the developed world, Western world, we will see healthcare come into homes rather than be in hospitals. That will happen, I believe, in the next 50 years. So what does that mean for solutions in the home? And those are probably going to be prefabricated solutions. Those are probably going to be of the tune of home hospice head walls or something like that. So I'm working with a company right now that's trying to look at the 50-year mark, the 60-year mark, and where prefabrication might be in servicing the needs of society, rather than just saying we have a module, where can we sell it, right? I think that's how I approach the education with my students, is asking deeper societal questions, and then potentially prefabrication is a solution, or potentially it's not, and that's okay. Does that answer the question?
I think that does. I guess I'm wondering about architecture training, and I guess also sustainability issues.
It's we in the industry have to, if this collective of people here are predominantly industry, I think, and some academics, we in the industry need to step forward and share our knowledge. And if the universities don't take that initiative to engage with industry, and Sydney Uni does indeed, Professor Matt Aitchison, if they don't, then the students will search for universities that do, education facilities that do provide that. So I think it's a responsibility of us to step forward and make ourselves available and share the knowledge. And it's a two-way street, of course, because you come across the right minds who help you do better.
Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of university lecturing, particularly in life cycle assessment, because I come from a sustainability and engineering background. And what I've found is that when I talk to university students and when I talk to university staff, they actually ask me, how do we build more sustainable buildings? And so there's certainly a thirst for that knowledge there. For me, from a sustainability angle, I would say, we need to be teaching people about what the potential solutions are. The concept of passive design has been around for quite a long time, and yet I don't think a lot of people are very confident even in what that really means. But the idea that there are solutions which enable you to have dramatically less waste, 70 or 80% less waste because of prefabrication. You can reduce your transport load, you can reduce your on-site craneage and mobile equipment costs. And not only that, but where sustainability is moving to in terms of enhanced responsibility across your supply chain. If you have a factory which is producing your buildings or producing modules for your buildings, then you have the opportunity to have a much deeper understanding of your supply chain and to be able to make some responsible choices about what you will or won't use in development of those buildings. And I think if we can get those concepts into the tertiary education courses, then prefabrication to me just kind of fits.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I think the case for prefabrication is a no-brainer, and you have organisations like the Australian University's Building Education Association, Orbia. I'd suggest that PrefabAUS and people in this room present at the Orbia conference and make the case for off-site construction. You also have the Construction and Property Services Industry Skills Council, who work behind the scenes to create courses for TAFE colleges, vocational colleges across the country, and work with state and federal governments. And PrefabAUS could see about perhaps getting on the board of them, SIPSIC, or they're changing the name to SkillsAUS. So yeah, I mean, I think, to quote Rachel Hunter, it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but it will happen. And I think the shift to prefabrication will be an inevitable but an inexorable process. So it's just a matter of getting the word out there and speaking to key people and getting the education out there.
Great. Any other questions for our panel? Matthew?
I've got a voice too. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I really enjoyed the conference over the last couple of days. Now I'm going to talk to the mic. Having also been in Canada and now here, I was just thinking that a lot of the presentations and even my own work is self-critical as much as an observation. We do tend to focus, I think, as an industry on the blockages, on the barriers, on the threats, and the things that are stopping us from things happening for this industry to mature. And I suppose throughout the conference I've been asking myself that, if we could imagine that we do resolve all of these problems, technical, financial, development, cultural, social, all of these sorts of things, if we can imagine that we can actually solve all of those things and remove those blockages, and we finally do get to this kind of promised land, what happens then?
We rule the world!
Yes!
We provide housing for the billions without adequate shelter. And we reduce our massive environmental footprint that the building industry is responsible for. What else would you like, Matt? We have a built environment that's far more elegant and enjoyable to the eye and to the experience of memorable places. Puts a smile on your face.
That's
good for your health. We all know the benefits.
That's a good answer. I like that.
Isn't that what you're teaching your students, Matt?
That's exactly what we're teaching.
I was thinking of this comment about Tesla, and I think we've all asked ourselves, who's going to be the Elon Musk of the construction industry, right? Who's going to come forward and say, let's revolutionize it? And I think not to point out too many barriers, but there are significant differences between our industry and any other industry that present challenges. Construction is a regional affair. Even if you have a multinational firm that engages in construction, they still have to engage a local contractor in order to perform a lot of the groundwork. So it's rare that we're actually going to see an Elon Musk come around and revolutionize the industry.
The auto industry has the same problem. In Australia, if you want to sell a motorcycle, you'll have some funny projection down over the back wheel so the number plate is in this very particular location. They have had to, the auto industry does have to modify for every market.
It just makes me interested that, you know, Warren Buffett owns a modular company in the United States, okay, the richest man in the world. And he hasn't been able to capitalize on this idea. You've got Fidelity Investments has put a significant amount of money into it. Pulte Homes, the largest home builder in North America. You know, I don't know how many homes they build every year. It must be single-family houses in, you know, in the millions. I don't know. And they haven't been able to capitalize on the idea. And so I've asked myself that question: who's going to come around and actually do that? People with money have tried, but there's. And I've come to a conclusion to what you're saying. It's an evolutionary change. I don't think anyone can come around and revolutionize this thing. And if they do, I'm extremely suspect if they say that. So I guess what I'm saying is I think that we have to be patient. I think this kind of meeting is really important for this kind of discussion to move forward and try to make that evolutionary change. And if we work together, we can kind of make that over a period of time. But a significant difference would be just moving from, say, 3% to 5% to 8% to 10% of the market. That's a great goal to have as an organization. It'll make a big difference in society. It'll make a great difference in our everyday lives. Will be better, right? Pocketbooks will be better as we move in this direction. So I think it's a win-win. But I just reiterate, anyone that can say, let's move this forward at a rapid pace. I think that's a dangerous argument in my opinion.
Damien, can I just give the flip side to that? Because I think, Ryan, that's a good point.
I've been just sort of sitting back, soaking up over the last 2 years the issues that everybody says their challenges are. And I think that probably one of the most fundamental is that as more work moves off-site, the contractor of record is challenged to work out how it's going to be paid for off-site. Traditionally, construction contracts have really reflected the built work on-site, a bit like the Green Star rating. Once it's there, you'll get rated. Once it's there, you'll get paid. But when you start to get 60% of the on-site inputs gathering from off-site, and increasingly off-site being offshore, the industry is finding that it's now got a cash flow challenge as to how you get those payments facilitated. And I thought the work that's being done through Build Offsite in the UK with PrefabAUS, with the relationship with Lloyds, where they're starting to provide a value chain rating where there is a level of surety being provided that each of the parties will do what they said they're going to do, and everything's going to get turned up on the job site in the way it was ordered. There's already, I think, something moving that is probably a little bit below the radar, and that is that once we've got a global insurance product that underwrites the performance of offsite from wherever it came to wherever it's going, suddenly we're going to have a chain of custody that will actually flow down through the industry. It's going to be behaviour changing for the people that first get it. And it's going to coincide with the arrival of the digital economy, where almost every piece of construction will have a digital fingerprint. It'll have a digital twin in the not too distant future. So it's going to sort of be a really interesting coincidence that this surety that's going to be required to underwrite the transactions of offsite, at the same time as the way that the pieces and parts of construction are going to become digital. I can imagine that probably 40 or 50% of the pieces that are coming towards construction sites by the 2025, but let's say 2030, won't come unless they've actually got a digital fingerprint, so that when they come through the factory, you'll know exactly where they are. When they get on the boat, you'll know exactly where it is. When it gets installed on the job site, you'll know that it's arrived and it's in good shape, and then you'll be able to turn on the switch and start monitoring it for the rest of its life. That's the reality of the industry that we've got ahead. So I'm not of the view that there's any time to wait here. I think that offsites is the definition of the modern construction industry. And I think we should be sort of pointing these things out to people and saying there's an urgency, put a boat in the water, or you just won't be part of the game.
Thanks, David. Good comment.
Governments in remote countries have no way of ordering houses, for example. They're used to procurement of infrastructure through some kind of financial deal. They don't know how to buy 1,000 homes. They want them, but they don't have that in place. And they're the tricks that we designers come up against. And so I suppose the administrative environment in which we need to work is where I would really like help. But that's a selfish point of view.
You want?
Sure. I think there's a couple of areas. One is, I think we're very happy living in the first world, and I'd really like to see some research into what prefab can do to help with housing affordability for those in our world that maybe aren't as fortunate as us, but also in those more third world countries that are struggling with what to do as they urbanise, as they need to build more housing for people. Prefab, I think, has enormous benefits that it can lend to that sort of thing. And I think in Australia, we actually have this amazing technical and technological ability to create wonderful things that we can export for the benefit of other countries as well as the benefit of our own economy. So I think we need to be looking in that way. The other opportunity that I see for prefab in terms of a research bent is the growing impacts of climate change and building resilient buildings and enabling cities to be resilient to the changes that are coming. And so where we can help our country and others to develop in that area, I think that would be very useful as well.
So I'm going to maybe take a 50,000 foot kind of perspective, and that is the commodity of the university is knowledge, right? As opposed to monetary means, our economy is knowledge. We are rewarded by the way in which we create or disseminate that knowledge. So I like to say the research really focuses on four things: the creation of new knowledge, the clarification of knowledge, refinement of that knowledge, the codification of that knowledge, or packaging or synthesizing of that knowledge, and then finally the communication, so 4 C's, communication of knowledge or disseminating that knowledge. The university used to be, say, the old guard, right? Cambridge, Oxford University used to be the place that would contain historic knowledge and use it or leverage it in society. And then it's gradually, universities taken on a role of engaging with society and industry in order to try and innovate. I think we're kind of in a later period of the university model, and that is not just harbinger of historic information and creator of new knowledge, but there's quite a bit of clarification and dissemination of knowledge, almost like a pinwheel at the center that's trying to create and codify all these different players and then spin it out, PrefabAUS, industry, etc. I think the universities are playing that role more and more in society. So I'm less interested in the subject matter that we might study and more interested in the university playing a more critical role as both as the creator, clarifier, codifier, and communicator of knowledge holistically in society. That might be a little theoretical, but I think it's important that we don't just see ourselves as servicing industry or holding on to knowledge, but we see ourselves more integral to that process.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, and I would encourage universities in this space to liaise regularly with government and industry on that matter. I mean, at this point, I should say that a complementary technology to offsite construction is, as I've already mentioned, BIM, Building Information Modelling, and the Australian Construction Industry Forum, along with the Australasian Procurement Construction Council, which is a government sister body, is creating the Australasian BIM Advisory Board, and to create common standards for BIM, not just in the construction industry, but also for telecommunications, utilities, roads, for everything in Australasia which involves BIM. So I guess that is potentially an area where further tertiary research could be undertaken to make sure that the BIM environment in Australia is cutting edge, and that we're leading the world in this area, because I really think that in, say, the UK, Singapore, Canada, they're really running hard in this space, and they're looking at developing their skills so that their construction companies can have an advantage internationally to compete on the global stage. So I really think that while Australia is not necessarily a follower regarding BIM, I think we also have some great innovation regarding BIM as well, and in many ways we are a BIM leader, but I think we have to make sure that we're on top of our game in terms of BIM.
I think we're going to leave it there. I'd like to thank the panel for their time, and that concludes the last session of the day.